Hello, everyone, and welcome to Summit Hollywood Together's Owning Your Narrative panel. We have gathered an extraordinary group of innovative, visionary people so that we can dive into a discussion about owning our narratives and representation. We're going to basically be discussing inclusion for all marginalized communities and talking to people who have been very influential in a lot of the storylines that we see and narratives that we see on TV and film today. And we're going to talk about what it really means to own our narrative in the media. So I am Joy Donnell, and I'm so honored to be moderating this panel today. I am a co-founder of the Center for Intersectional Media and Entertainment, and CIME for short. And intersectionality is so important that we put it in the name of our company because we are dedicated to taking an intersectional as well as interdisciplinary approach to advancing representation by working with artists, academics, allies in the industry, activists, as well as audiences to get to the root of Hollywood's history of exclusion and how it got baked into the system so that we can see how the tropes turn into truisms within the mechanisms, and we can work together to come up with fresh solutions for pipelines as well as equity. So this owning your narrative conversation is near and dear to my heart. And with that in mind, please join me in welcoming this brilliant group of filmmakers and community leaders. First up, she is an advocate and director of the Muslim Public Affairs Council's Hollywood Bureau. Please welcome Sue Obeidi. Next, she is a scholar, producer, consultant, and the president of Native Media Strategies. Please welcome Dr. Joey Proudfit. Next, he is the CEO of Bridgeworks Entertainment and an executive producer for many projects, including Netflix's Julie and the Phantoms. Please welcome George Salinas. And finally, she is a renowned filmmaker known for her landmark film, The Watermelon Woman, and directorial work for Lovecraft Country. Please welcome Cheryl Dunye. Thank you to everyone for joining me here today. This is going to be such an exciting conversation. And before we get into it, I want to just take a minute to talk about who you are and what you do, because titles are great, but purpose is magic. So, if we can start, Cheryl, I would start with you. Like, what are some of the things that you're currently working on and especially in connection to expanding our ideas of culture and our cultural narratives?
Yes, hi, I'm Cheryl, everyone. Thank you for having me on this panel and to talk about intersectionality and, really what I'm about. I'm an African-American lesbian woman, warrior, mother. I would just say I'm, an Audre Lordian, if people want to dig into who Audre Lorde was, is, and is in the future. And that's sort of what I am about in my work. My work really explores those intersections. It started all the way with The Watermelon Woman, where I sort of did what I call the Dunye mentory. So I use myself as a text, either in a physical form or intellectual form. And I work as a director, writer, and producer. Most recently, I think, as you mentioned, I did this episode of Lovecraft Country, episode 5, that, really explored, basically everything that I was about. Who we are, who we think we are, who we want to be, our sexuality, sexual history, African-American history. And those are some of the projects that I'm working on. I just recently, on my own personal project list, have optioned Joel Gomez's The Gilda Stories to adapt for television. And that's one of the most renowned LGBTQ queer novels about sort of speculative vampire time traveling. Joel is a wonderful artist, writer, who has allowed me, like my other wonderful collaborators that I work with, to adapt this text. So that's my own personal project that I'm working on. And then outside of that, up to direct other people's work, one being on All Rise right now, a show with Simone Missick, who played Misty Knight, if people remember her, but now she's a Black woman judge on CBS. And just completed the work on a pilot called Delilah for OWN Warner Brothers.
Oh, fantastic. And you hit so many buttons for me. The Audre Lorde, I was like, yes. Yes, 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 yes. She's actually one of our instructors, Absentia. So I love that. Sue, what are some things that you're currently working on to advance culture?
Thank you for the question, and thank you to Impact24 and to all my fellow panelists. I'm so honored to be here. The Muslim Public Affairs Council's Hollywood Bureau works in the industry to change the narrative around Muslims and Islam. As you all know, we have taken a beating, pretty much like every other marginalized community in the industry, where we've been vilified from the inception, really, and definitely after 9/11. Prior to 9/11 and after 9/11. So we decided to, since we're in the backyard of the industry, we're in a city called LA, California, we decided to open up the Hollywood Bureau where we do 5 things, and they all start with C's, so I can remember them. The first thing we do is we consult on TV and film projects. We are partners in the industry where we work with television and film producers to help them tell a better story, basically, more authentic, more accurate, more fair. Positivity, is great, but we really want it authentic. Okay. The second thing we do is we connect our screenwriters, our directors, and our producers to industry decision makers and creatives. And we are building a beautiful pipeline of Muslim screenwriters that will one day have their own series, their own films, and it is happening, it really is, and it's just been wonderful to see. The third thing we do is we contribute our thought leadership by organizing and speaking on panels such as this. We also go to Sundance, ATX, and variety panels and organize panels and speak on their panels as well. We also organize our screenwriting labs where we partner up with production companies, with studios. And our latest competition was actually just ended with the Blacklist, and they got a beautiful number of submissions, and it was the first ever Muslim list. And for the first ever Muslim list, they were very pleased with the number of applicants. And so in late January, early February, hopefully we'll be announcing our winners. We do 2 other things that start with C. We create, and sometimes when we have funding, we put out a fellowship to create a short story where we'll put in some funding in it and partner up with another production company to do the same. And the 5th thing we do is celebrate, and that's our Media Awards Gala, and that's going on our 29th annual Media Awards. So we connect, we consult, connect, contribute, create, and celebrate.
Oh, beautiful. And 29th annual coming up. That's fantastic.
And that's how we actually started in the industry. Casey Kasem, for those of you who remember Casey from America's Top 40, was a good friend of Impact's and said, you need to start a gala where you can honor projects and people who embody voices of courage and conscience, just like GLAAD, NAACP, the Image Awards, and it works. It really does work. It's great. It's a great way to recognize and to celebrate.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that. George, what is some of the driving force behind your work, and how is your work connecting to the change that you want to see in the world?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me in the panel. I think this is fantastic that, and for the panelists, thank you all for, being here too. The work that we're doing that's changing is, I think, and Cheryl can attest to this, is representation. I think now that we're seeing and finding our voices, now people like me are starting to, because we need more people on the business side. I think that's in the thing that we're missing most than anything, especially in the Latin community, is, we don't have that gateway yet. So what I started doing is I started trying to find my niche in the industry to see because I'm an executive producer, so not a director, not a writer. So and also seeing how I can advance not just the Latinx community, but just overall the voices, right? So Julian and Phantoms came in because when I started Bridgeworks, the whole point to it was how do I hone and my voice means something in the industry when I walk into a pitch room, when I walk into an executive room, and how do I become that person that they're going to listen to and they need to listen to me? So I found a way to do it was to intellectual property. So we went around the world to Latin America, knock on doors to get some of the, what we call TV formats. It worked. We started selling. It was funny because we saw it in a sense of the need of intellectual property. But then I found out also that I had the voice that I can say, you know, we want this to be a diverse cast. So, and that's our rule. It's, you know, we don't have that, we move to the next studio, which should work because Julian and Phantoms has a Latina and an African American as friends. So that's what you see every day in our world. So I was excited about that. And obviously now continuing, we've extended from Latin America to now South Korea, Germany, and other Asian countries to find new TV formats. So now we've become pretty much the go-to to studios, TV studio streamers, to find the next project. We go out with 24 projects a year. So it's literally, you know, it was funny because I didn't notice it until later on, and somebody told me was, you know, you found a way to break the mold where people like me don't walk into a boardroom or studio and are able to say, hey, this is what's next, and have the power to do that. So it pretty much at the end of the day is how can we empower, you know, just the voices that are out there, and on top of that, the new voices, because as we know in our industry is, you know, people want what we call the low-hanging fruit, which is, you know, it doesn't exist in, especially my community, because in my community, I mean, I grew up in South Central Los Angeles, so we didn't have that, you know, Hollywood dream. It was more survival than anything. So now being able to go back and talk to many of the high school kids and just kids like me, that what I used to, where I grew up, now to tell them, look, there's an avenue now that we can follow. And so I'm very proud of that because we've been able to do that. But at the same time is, you know, we've never shied away also from good content. I think that's the most important thing too, is creating great storylines and creating, you know, the impact where, you know, it makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And we're going to get more into that too through this panel, just because of all the different ways that you all are working individually. And that collectively, that's a conversation as well. And so, Jolie, you know, you work in so many different ways. It's like, what is that driving force for you in the work that you're doing? And what, you know, like, what is that actually, why are you doing what you're doing?
Good morning, everybody. Myoyan Notong Jolie Proudfit. I'm zooming to you from my home in Carlsbad, California, the traditional homelands of the Payonkowicham people, which are my people. So thank you so much for organizing this panel. You all are very impressive and inspirational, and this is all very hopeful. What I do is for my community, my people, our future. And it's also for our past. And as a political scientist and someone who's been engaged in policy making and policy shifting to better serve American Indians, what we know is true is that most individuals around the globe, but especially in the US, have limited knowledge of American Indians. And that limited knowledge comes from the Hollywood engine. It started with dime store novels. And has proceeded to, you know, we are the foundation of the Hollywood industry with James Fenimore Cooper's works, The Leatherstocking Tales, The Last Mohicans, which has created a genre of stereotypes that we're still trying to deconstruct. And, you know, it's very difficult for policymakers to enact policies to protect our tribal lands, our people, our health and wellness if they think that we're dead and in the past. So that narrative shift must change. And the work that I do is to promote and enhance narrative sovereignty for Native peoples and all peoples, and to be frank, but I'm really intentionally focusing on our Native American population because there needs to be some intentionality and some focus on American Indians. So as we're having a conversation of including voices from the margins and intersectionality and diversity, I always want to remind my colleagues and my friends to never forget the Native, folks. Many of you don't realize that we're everywhere and everywhere around you because, again, the Hollywood engine has perpetuated a very stereotypical image. So if we don't look a certain way or fit a certain stereotype, people have a tendency to believe that we don't exist. So the work that I do in bridging the gap between the entertainment industry, content creators, media makers, is to make sure they have an opportunity to collaborate and work in a very authentic, respectful, reciprocal, and responsible way with tribal peoples and tribal communities. What I want to bring to the entertainment industry is that to not have a fear of telling the story for fear of doing it wrong. Because I've also seen that happen where people are like, they want to do right, but they've been burnt in the past, or they're like, working with Native peoples, it's a little difficult because there's so many different tribes and there's so many protocols, and people with their good intentions oftentimes will shy away from inclusivity because they feel like, they'll make a misstep, and time is money and money is time. And so the work that I do helps bring people together so that we're working at this collectively from the get-go. I don't think in 2020, we should be hearing the phrase from content creators, I have this idea of telling a Native story. Can you get me a consultant? That has to go away. That has to go away. What we need to hear is we want to produce and invest and distribute stories from Native peoples in an authentic way. How can we collaborate and work together to elevate the authentic representation of Native people? And, elevation is an aspirational concept. We want to be just seen as human beings. And, you look at the LGBTQ community in the last 2 decades and the transformation our society has had from being majority country opposed to gay marriage to the majority of the country to be for gay marriage. And that happened in a very small period of time. People have been working for many, many decades to make that change. But really what helped move that forward was making individuals present as human beings. Ellen, Will and Grace, and now every show and every character and every series and reality series has this intersectionality of LGBTQ individuals and peoples. They humanized our relatives. They humanized our relatives. So I am hoping to be able to help us humanize and bring forward American Indian voices and peoples, because, we should be characters in all of your series and all of your programs. And, I'm really excited about the future. There's just so many wonderful things happening. And I have to say, I want to give respect to the Black Lives Matter movement, because I do think that the tragedies, let me say, of what's been happening in real time in front of our eyes helped elevate and move forward conversations that we should have been having and opportunities that should have been engaged in a more aggressive way. And so I think we all kind of need to lift that up. And as a Native woman, I want to give respect to that movement and say, let's lock arms and do this together.
You touched upon so many things that are so true and relevant. And I think when we hear these terms, diversity, equity, inclusion, diversity isn't something that you have to go looking for. The world is naturally diverse. What has been shown a lot of times to the media is just this very narrow lens, and Sue, Jolie touched upon that, just the power of being seen as human, being able to humanize yourself in relation to owning the narrative. When you think about the impact that perceptions have on society, on societal level, how do we actually use inclusion as a mindset to get where we need to get to within this industry.
Thank you. And if may I just comment on Jolie's thoughts? I just want to underscore how, you know, when you said consulting, it is not, Impact wants to work itself out of the consulting business. And that is why we are focusing on creating that pipeline of screenwriters and producers and directors into the industry. So thank you for that. I mean, literally, we are living to work ourselves out of a job in consulting. And then with regards to, I just want to just say to the LGBTQ community, I'm a woman of a certain age. So before, you know, Will and Grace and Modern Family, there was Three's Company, there was Soap with Billy Crystal. And so it's been what might look to some younger folks like, oh, you know, how far the LGBTQ community has you know, moved forward. It's been decades. I mean, even as a child, when John Ritter was, you know, portrayed a, you know, a gay man, it was a big deal back in the 70s. You know, I know I'm dating myself, but I just wanted to say that. And then with regards to, you know, the Black, you know, community, African-American community, you know, the largest population of Muslims in America is the Black Muslim community, and the fastest growing population in the within the Muslim community is the Latinx community. But I just want to say how the industry is void of Black Muslim narratives, and that is such an insult to Muslims and to the world. And so I just wanted to tell you, like, that's at the forefront of Impact's work, and we're moving forward on so many levels on that. But anyway, I just wanted to say that. I just needed to get it out of the way. Thank you so much for those comments. The truth of the matter is, if God wanted us all the same, he would have created us all the same. And so he created us different so we can learn from each other and be together so we can complement each other. I want to say that inclusion is, I believe, is the way it was meant to be. And for whatever reason, we all kind of know, but for, you know, those reasons, we were torn apart, we were marginalized, we were pitted against each other. Inclusion at the end of the day, is what we're going to land on. And it's very important because we are better together. We, you know, we can go so long for doing it alone, but it's unsustainable. That's really the ultimate truth. And in less than 25 years, all the minority communities are going to be the majority in America. And so we need to kind of get moving on that. Inclusion, where it's going to land. I don't like the words humanize. I actually don't like the words, you know, normalize, because it makes us feel like we weren't human, and then Hollywood comes along and humanizes us. I mean, we can have a debate on that, you know, but inclusion, where it's going to land, because ultimately I believe that is the way our creation was set up, by being included with one another and not pitted against each other.
Cheryl, you know, I'm sure that you can piggyback on some of what Sue said, and Jolie, as well as George, especially in relation to breaking through the monolithic mindset, the monolithic tropes, a lot of times that have been pumped out around people. And you've actually like really dug in with your work to do things like show Black skin being loved upon in a love scene in Lovecraft country, you know, like, and to just show Black women being badass lawyers and all rise. You know, why has it been important to you to be able to show a more expanded narrative that way in your work?
Thank you for that question, and thank you, my esteemed panelists, for all your, I mean, I'm just like taking notes. You know, we believe what we see in media. These are our first, you know, for the majority, especially with 2020, you know, the majority of young folk, old folk are getting their messages from the media, right? Who taught us how to love? Who taught us how to have sex? Who taught us how to whatever? The media, right? And we believe this. And our parents believed it. And some people's parents believed it. And we just take it as rote. Right? So what we need to do, and what I do in my work, is put my media out there. You know, the Dunye mentory, I label myself as the beginning, as my core, and I create it. you know, be it small scale as shorts. I'm not afraid of making a short film, and I encourage all young makers to start there, or new makers to start with creating short films, to produce, you know, and I do believe with George, we need people who aren't just writer-directors. I want to be a writer-director. I want to be an actor. We need people in finance. We need people in, you know, all, you know, the George Floyd of this moment is a moment of opportunity to, and a painful moment, to break this system to just break apart what's been going on, right? To really act on what we believe in. And so I'm putting it to the test with my work, you know, in that sense. I mean, I'd rather be, and I'm blessed with being able to work in shows now where people believe in those things and hire me to continue on to create those messages. So, you know, you are your own storytelling, you are your own machine, you're your own boss. You know, the systemic systems are going to have to, it's going to be very painful on both sides, because we are just, you know, to blame as being part of that system, to, you know, as the white side or whomever you want to, you know, blame for it. But we are a part of that, and it's going to hurt. It's going to feel like you don't get your coffee in the morning. You know, it's going to feel like you're trying to, you know, end your addiction with sugar or whatnot, you know, or smoking. You know, these things are hard to do, but they are painful and they have to be done. We need to rip ourselves out. It's sort of like the Matrix. You have to rip yourself out and just be like, you know, what, you know, and be your own new palette and create your own new narratives and create your own new allies and cross the line. The Black narrative is not the only narrative. I mean, I think that's one thing that American media really has put, you know, in front of it. Black bodies on the ground, Black narratives to be told. That's what we need to do. There's so many other narratives, so many other communities that need to be highlighted, and you're here to represent them. Native American, you know, Muslim, Asian American. I mean, there's just so many, like Latinx characters. My wife is Latinx. Our company, Jingletown Film, is also exploring new Latinx titles about people who lived on the border, on the margins. Marginality is our strength.
Oh, I love the marginality is our strength. Yes, because right there, that's the thing that has not been brought to light. So there's so much rich territory to tell the stories differently. You know, and Julie, I think that this connects to a lot of what you were saying before. Could you talk a little bit about just this power, the power within reclaiming your history and reclaiming the way that your narrative is told on screen, through actually like really exposing more of the beauty, the complex beauty of indigenous cultures and people in film and television?
You know, there are 574 tribes in the United States alone. Just the US, you know, and then you have indigenous communities in Canada and New Zealand and Latin America and South America. So they're just primed and ready for that box to open up of beautiful storytelling and beautiful people in all their shades and sizes. You know, I smile when Cheryl's talking because Lovecraft was, loved it. And I love seeing love exhibited on the screen that looks different, that there's shades. I mean, just that experience, because yes, you know, I kind of really grew up on Love Jones and Love and Basketball and The Best Man. And, you know, my husband says, why do you watch all those? And I said, because I don't get to see people of color in rom-coms in beautiful houses in the Hamptons dressed really nice. So that's as close as I'm going to get to like Native women, you know, and men in these places. And so, well, as a Native woman, I'm looking over here for just a little bit of difference and diversity, kind of a peek into a world that I don't know. People want to look into Native communities. So let's give them that opportunity. And, you know, not everything should be set in 1790. You know, those stories, historical narratives are important, and we need to deconstruct them and tell them through our own lens. But we need to tell the contemporary story. We need to make sure that we are talking about Native futurisms as well, and then showcase that beauty. And I think, you know, the magical realism with Native people, but not the not being stuck through a European lens of what they think Native medicine or healing or ritual practices are. We have wonderful storytellers. That's a part of who we are. You know, we are people with oral narratives and oral histories. I'm working with our first ever California Indian woman showrunner, who is the content creator and showrunner for a Netflix series called Spirit Rangers. It's a preschool show. And this preschool show is going to showcase this family of American Indian forest rangers. And these children will take us on these magical tours where they solve problems and they learn how to be good little human beings through traditional Native storytelling. I mean, how beautiful is that? I have a 9-year-old daughter, and I'm just so excited that, you know, we're going to have the opportunity to expose future generations of not just Native kids, but children about the diversities and the beauty and the kind of tapestry of Native people and Native stories, and just really, you know, focusing on the diversity. We are also very different. Hollywood has done a number to kind of keep like 3 narratives going, you know, whether it's the sexy Pocahontas female or the ogre, you know, and we see these same stereotypes for the African American community, Latino community. And so we're breaking those apart and just really showcasing who we are as a diverse, changing, you know, multidimensional population. And we have wonderful storytellers that are coming out and they're filming stories in their own homelands. You know, Sterling Harjo has a series that he's working with Taika Waititi on, and Res Dogs, which I can't wait for, which is a contemporary look at, you know, Native young people in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and being shot in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I mean, that's just, I love that. You know, in this children's series, Spirit Rangers, it's centered in the showrunner's, you know, home place, which is Santa Ynez Chumash territory. So gone are, you know, moving everything to the Northern Plains. Not everything happens in the Northern Plains. Not everything should include flute music or drums, you know? We like all kinds of things. And so I just think moving against the grain, you know, and I think it's good for business. People are tired of the same old tropes, right? It's good for business. So as we're seeing, you know, Black superheroes and Native superheroes and Native futurisms, and then deconstructing the past. I'm working on a BBC series now to basically deconstruct James Fenimore Cooper. Isn't that just, that's just a beautiful way of, I guess, getting some sweet revenge.
I mean, yes to all of that, because you're right. Like, people are tired of the same old, and you keep doing the same. You can't keep giving the same. And audiences are so intelligent. They want to actually see what they know of life to be reflected back to them. And they want to be also seeing what they haven't gotten a chance to view before. And so, yes, this is about actually expanding, creating new archetypes, right? Getting rid of the tropes that don't work. I always say, let's ball up those tropes and just throw them in the trash and set them on fire. But George, this is also about thinking differently about business models, right? Like, what we know is that BIPOC creators, they have come to the table. They've been having, you know, vibrant ideas this whole time, but boxed in thought, decision makers with boxed in thought and boxed in approach, right? So how can we go about thinking differently, rethinking and creating new business models that will really give BIPOC creators a chance to be able to get their projects made, new voices come to the table, advanced talent that we need to be advancing in, you know, in an organized way, so that we can really be driving the business model of this as well?
Absolutely. I think, look, the biggest thing is owning it, right? I mean, that's, you know, we have a small management side to our company because it was a need. It wasn't because, you know, I was looking to make more business. It's just the need that I didn't see also on the talent side, where, you know, we represent Melissa Barrera, who is now one of, you know, she was on Vita and now is in 2 big leads in feature films that, you know, it was a fight, but we need to own it in a sense of, like Cheryl said, is, you know, if you're a director, do your short film, do the short film you really want to do, and really do the best job you can. So there is no no's in a sense of nobody can deny talent. It's just, it's what it is. In our businesses, you know, if you have a voice and it's something that, you know, that you create that is just incredible, people are going to respond. And that's why we do what we do, because we, you know, when we found, you know, the whole thing with the TV formats was, like I was explaining in the beginning, was to give me in the door, to give me the power to do what I wanted to do. But that also meant I'm responsible for, you know, which I took it upon myself, is to find the new voices, right? To find the new Cheryls, the new writers, it doesn't matter what they are, Native American or Muslim, African American, whatever. It's just, for us, is, I always say this, is why do I always have to keep saying that I'm going against the grain? Whereas everyone else is doing what they want to do, the stories they want to do, is why can't I do a story with a writer or showrunner who's different? It's now in my purview now that I can say, hey, this is the show that I want to do because of this fact. And this is why is it going to work, because I've already put everything on the table for you. So there is no way to say no. And the person who did that for me, that I learned it from, I don't know him, but I just saw what he did was Tyler Perry. I mean, that's just a great example of somebody owning their craft and owning their, you know, making their own rules. But at the same time, you know, we have to start, you know, on my end, especially in the Latinx community, is what we're starting to do more is no more of the narco stuff. I mean, no more of the, you know, the typical Latino show, I guess you want to call it. It's now is, how come we can't do the TV shows we see on the air? You know, like All Rise, like things like that. Is just great programming. And so for, you know, in the sense is what I was saying is, you know, once we take ownership of that and we start seeing, like, you know, this is what I can do and fight for it, because that's where I've been doing this whole time, is just fighting to the point of, you know, people listening, and they are now listening because we are a big community. I mean, all of us in this panel, you know, at the end of the day, we all support each other. I mean, if you saw, you know, Netflix's show, one of the biggest shows is Money Heist. It's from Spain. I mean, that just tells you that we're all watching different things, but content really matters. It's storytelling really matters. So for all the artists who are out there trying to get, you know, to a point and you don't have access, you know, when I grew up, it was really hard because there was no Google, or, you know, you had to literally, you know, find a way, you know, to do, meaning that meant mentors, that meant talking to people, that meant, you know, getting out there. Now you have all the access, which is filmmakers. Now you have YouTube, Google, everything. Use it and make yourself known. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, is put yourself out there, make yourself known. And if you want to come to the side of the business side, really learn it. I mean, this is a career. This is not a hobby. It's, you know, you need to learn the business and really learn what is it that, you know, that drives it. So when you get to the table, you get an opportunity, you're smart enough to project that.
No one can deny talent, is what you said, and no one, absolutely, that is so true. And no one can deny a critical mass. We have to continue working together and have, you know, we have to have each other's back. We need to get the industry to feel, the traditional industry to feel that we're not included, when we're not in the room, not one or two, but many of us, there's a void. We need to get there. So I just wanted to underscore what you said. It's very important. And about the whole thing about a hobby, you have no idea how many Muslims how many doctors who are literally brain surgeons, I'm not kidding, who really just wanted to be a screenwriter, and they're in their 50s trying to make a career change. We need to make sure that our communities see this as a real vocation, as a career path. It's the most powerful industry in the world. Forget government. Government is weak. The entertainment and news media is where it's happening. And so I just wanted to underscore what George said.
I mean, absolutely. Our stories shape our beliefs shape our reality. That is why these stories are so powerful. And, you know, you all touched upon owning your craft and that critical mass. But there's also a discussion of equity, okay? And I want to pose this to everybody on this panel, you know, because we talk about getting a seat at the table, but is there also credibility in building your own table? Because we don't own the media. Like, we do not own it. There are so many gatekeepers involved in distribution in particular, right? It's like, so it's the whole aspect of getting your project greenlit is, yes, it's a business to it, but there's so many caveats involved. I just want to throw this out, and whoever is feeling compelled, jump in as you feel called upon to speak on it. Like, what is this balance for us in advancing this between getting a seat at the table and just saying, you know, I don't even like the house that this table is in. I'm going to grill my own house and my own table. What does that look like for us?
For the Muslim Public Affairs Council, I mean, we believe that very few things are mutually exclusive. I think we need to do both. We need to be at the table, because the main stage is the main stage of the traditional industry, and we need to create our own tables and our own houses. There's so many paths to change, you know, and so in our community, the way we're doing it is we're trying to deal with all fronts. Being at the table, being at the head of the table, and not just the token seat, but also creating the new tables. They're not mutually exclusive.
Well, streaming has, you know, kind of democratized, I guess, distribution in many ways. And so people are having an opportunity to see more that they hadn't. I know, you know, I program one of the largest Indigenous film festivals in the US. And one of the reasons for starting that film festival is film festivals were for the elite. So that's where you saw pretty much Native cinema, Native documentary, but it wasn't even getting to the community, right? So creating a platform. But now with all of the streaming services, I don't know what the future is for festivals, especially with COVID-19. And so there's an opportunity. It's like self-publishing, right? It's about impact. What is good? What is quality? What is making impact? What's the buzz? And so I think we need to have our folks involved in all aspects of elevating that representation and sending good buzz. And, you know, for the Native communities, sometimes we're our own worst enemy. You know, we're aspirational for the perfect, so we kind of deconstruct and are so super critical or hypercritical, and there's a lot of reasons, psychological reasons for that. So I want to make sure that, you know, what Sue said, we need to have that solidarity and be supportive, and, you know, let the industry know that we're going to work together to elevate our voices and, you know, impact that and really demand for serious change. I wanted to bring the attention to, you know, a lot of what has been made about Native people has been real poverty porn. And it just really, you know, it's unfortunate. And, you know, I'm someone who could relate to that background and growing up in that environment. And that's the last thing I want to have showcased. I want to dream. I want to have fantasy. I want to move away from that. Is there an opportunity to tell those stories and people need to tell those stories? Yes, but that should come from us with all the respect and humanity and cultural sensibility that it deserves. But we're also dealing with lots of things that are showcased on television and in cinema that deal with the real world, like missing and murdered Indigenous women, for example. You know, missing and murdered Indigenous women is a very tragic event that is happening in Indian country, in Canada and the US, and at really alarming rates. And we've been working very hard to get the government to just collect the data on us. And you have a show like Big Sky, which is focused in Montana, addressing the issue of missing and murdered women. And the two lead characters are a white woman and a black woman in Montana. Come on now. Now you're hijacking our injustices in our narrative, and you're making a TV series, and you don't even include us in Montana. And so we have to all push back and say enough. let's redirect, let's stop, and let's not add insult to injury. But this is something that's very real and very hurtful. So I was glad to see tribal leaders respond to David E. Kelley and the production, but let's see if they can make those changes. So I think this is where we can collectively work together and say, no, we are not going to allow this to happen to this population or this population or this population. Let us make sure that we are working in solidarity, in collectivity, so that we're not siloing or leaving any brother or sister or colleague, behind.
Actually, Cheryl and George, I would love to kind of dig deeper into a lot of what Jolie touched upon too, like when there are allies in the industry who really do want to answer the calling in, and that is feeling stronger to them than being scared of being called out, So if you could think of some actionable next steps toward equity, towards better inclusion, that you could advise these allies in the industry that are just, they're looking for what are some things that they can do, what would you advise them?
I would say that they should make some of their shows non-union to start with, just in the sense of production, because there are a lot of African-American, all of us on here, all our representative communities, aren't able to get into those unions. I mean, when you even start looking at people on the other side of the lens who are holding the cameras, who are moving around equipment, who are the grips, who are the lighting, they look just like they're white guys in shorts, to say that, older white guys in shorts who gifted it down this to the next white guy in shorts to the next white guy. And there's a few other faces, other bodies, other genders, but for the most part, that already is an environment as an actor, producer, anybody who walks on stage, you have to kind of get through to deal with. So if we start to figure out how to deal with the unions around how the shows are crafted and made, that might be seen. And that goes all the way up to the producers union, to the directors, all the guilds and stuff like that need to kind of shift like that. And so to look for different, like, not that little program to help the minorities and diversity in, but like shift, just give it up, like, thank you for your indie festival for years. Give it up. And you're starting to see those people. Sundance is changing. Warner Brothers is changing. All these places are changing to a lot of different bodies and colors and whatnot in there. So we're starting to see, some proper alignment. We'll see what people do with it, because people of color, queers, whatever, aren't always our friends. So you have to kind of snip out who are the right allies and who aren't.
What about you, George? What does it look like for
yeah,
you?
absolutely. What Cheryl was saying, I mean, at the same time, Jolie said it very, very correctly, because the Latinx community is the same way. Is we need to get out of our own way. Sometimes we're our worst enemy, because the way we grew up, because our parents are immigrants, because they don't want to speak up, or they're just afraid. So I think what we need to start doing is just look. I think you said you asked the question, how do we get to this table? And we deserve to be in that table, obviously, because we see these numbers, and we can all see these numbers. When you're talking about a African-American movie or Latinx movie or TV show, you see these numbers you cannot deny. So unless we start taking the risk and start saying, no, this is how it goes, period. This is how I'm going to do it, to the people she was just talking about, is that it's going to the table and saying, look, you're doing it wrong. I mean, I've had experiences where people are sitting in a writer's room and they're all no diversity, but they're writing about the Latin world. And it's like, how can you write that? Like, how do you even know what happens? You don't. So we need to start saying, you need to start putting those people on those tables. Because at the end of the day is, I've always said this, is just because we're colored doesn't mean we have to make color shows, color movies. Why can't we just make a great story like we've done all this time? So my biggest thing is always, especially for filmmakers, writers, and all that, is write what you want to write, direct what you want to direct. Don't let anyone influence you. Don't let anyone tell you what you need to do, in a sense of that it has to be a Latin, African-American, Native American, Muslim thing, because you're that. Because the new generation, especially me, because I'm first generation Latin, is we didn't grow up with that. We didn't grow up with the Spanish stuff. My parents did, but we didn't. So it doesn't mean that that's what we want to watch. So the change comes to that where, you know, I tell everyone, you know, and whoever listens to this and everything is own what you have and just go with your talent. That's it. At the end of the day is the Writers Guild and like you mentioned, inclusion stuff. I'm still in a kind of like an awe when people have inclusions in their companies because it's, wait a minute, aren't we already there? Aren't we, do you really need to go find people? Like we're there, we're all here. It's like, you know, in for the lack of, you're not bringing them to the table, that's on your end. And that's where we need to start creating and nurturing these talents that, you know, when that way we can present them, you know, and say, here you go, here's a great short, here's a great director who comes from some corner of the world that is, you know, is doing great stuff. That's to me, and like I said, what Cheryl said is getting out of the way and just, again, I can't emphasize this more, is just do what you want to do and let it work itself out. Because look, people like me, people like Cheryl, people like in this, Julie and Sue and everyone, you know, I fight every day, you know, with especially with the formats and fighting, because the people that we're bringing up are new talent. And I mean, and you know this, in the industry, people do not take that very lightly because they see the bottom line. But at the end of the day is, when you have the information and you know that everything, that what it means to them is a balance sheet, is very simple, is you're going to get X amount of numbers. Once you have that power of knowledge and now you're backed it up with all this other stuff, you're not, it's going to be really hard for someone in the table to deny you. Because I'm sorry, it's like those numbers that we're seeing, they're all diverse. This is not just one race watching, you know, a TV show. This is not just one race going to the movie theater when it was open before COVID. So, you know, those numbers mean something. And so we do have the power to walk in and say, no, this is how it should go. And period. I don't care who you are. It's, you know, this is, because this is the right way to do it.
Not only do we have the right to be in the room, we should not let anyone make us feel like we were done a favor for being in the room. And so, and doing the work. So I just want to underscore that.
I love that.
Yeah.
And actually, this is our last question. And I want to pose it to everyone and just ask you to call upon your journey, okay? And just to think for all of these creators that they are out here, they are working to rise, they want to own their narrative, and they just need one word of advice that will keep them grounded in their resiliency so that they can actually own their narrative. What do you want to say to them?
It doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful.
Wonderful. What about you, Jolie?
Honesty. Be true to yourself, true to your people, true to your story, and just tell your truth. Just tell, you know, just, and defend it, own it. Because when you speak in your own honesty, there's no one can shake you, right? That's the power.
Cheryl?
I usually say this is a great one, is like this, the present, this is the moment now. You're never in your body with your ideas within your context as this you are now, to have these yearnings. So do them, because there's always McDonald's. You can always McDonald's.
Yes. George?
To me, it's just do it. Just do it. Don't walk on, you know, don't live just to breathe. Do it. I mean, what at the end of the day is, you know, the worst thing that can happen is somebody tell you no.
I love that.
You have nothing to lose. That's it too.
Oh.
You have nothing to lose. And that's how we all got here. We haven't, I mean, look, you took everything else, but I have nothing to lose. I'm going to say what you know, I'm going back to my, you know, comfort of whatever I'm used to. So I'm saying it.
Wow, everyone, this has been such a powerful conversation. I want to thank Sue, Jolie, Cheryl, and George for sharing their insights with us today. Thank you so much to Impact24 and the Hollywood Reporter for making this happen and actually creating space for this conversation. Again, my name is Joy Donnell. This has been the Summit Hollywood Together's Owning Your Narrative panel. Thank you for joining us.